Gary, are you ready?
Yes, I am. O God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. O God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. O God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, O Lord.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gary. Corey, are you ready?
Yes. I'll be reading tonight from Gleanings. Say, deliver your souls, O people, from the bondage of self, and purify them from all attachment to anything besides me. Remembrance of me cleanseth all things from defilement. Could ye but perceive it? Say, were all created things to be entirely divested of the veil of worldly vanity and desire, the hand of God would in this day clothe them one and all with the robe, he doeth whatsoever he willeth in the kingdom of creation, that thereby the sign of his sovereignty might be manifested in all things. Exalted then be he, the sovereign Lord of all, the Almighty, the supreme protector, the all-glorious, the most powerful. Intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who have drawn nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul and attract the hearts of all men. Whoso reciteth in the privacy of his chamber the verses revealed by God, the scattering angels of the Almighty shall scatter abroad the fragrance of the word uttered by his mouth, and shall cause the heart of every righteous man to throb. Though he may at first remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue of the grace vouchsafed unto him must needs sooner or later exercise its influence upon his soul. Thus have the mysteries of the revelation of God been decreed by virtue of the will of him who is the source of power and wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Albers, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I hope you all read the invitation to this talk this week, because I'm actually going to go off script and mention that when I called Fouad yesterday, I asked him, why did you leave out being a doctor in your biography? Because it seems like it was a bit of a secret, you know, that Fouad's passions of trying to find spiritual truths are indeed extracurricular activities, and that in his day job, he is a surgeon. And I don't mean to say day job, because at sometimes, you know, he's performing surgeries at night and he's still attending these talks. Now, the reason for that, I learned over the course of my conversation. Dr. Abbas, in pursuing a surgical profession, eventually came to the conclusion that even in times of absolute excellence, there is always that possibility of failure. And in the medical profession, failure often means the end of a human being's life. Now, the personality of Dr. Abbas is as follows. His mind, in a situation like that, doesn't go to, my goodness, what have I done? What can I do better? Woe is me. And it instead goes, how can I still be of service to the people who are in the waiting room, awaiting my work? And that's where his spiritual journey began, coming to that question, how can I still be of service? In the Baha'i faith, we don't have clergy. We have the roles of clerics, people are tasked with safeguarding the spiritual well-being and the upliftment of those around them in the same way that someone who is a member of an ecclesiastical order would in the past. But there is no order. That duty falls upon all of us. For his part, Dr. Abbas brings a scientific mind to that role, asking questions using the scientific method about spiritual answers. I hope he can share some of those answers which he's found tonight.
Thank you, Alma.
Well, I guess, can you hear me okay? That's a pretty tall order to fill, Albers. Thanks for the setup, but I will see if I can share my screen. So it's a long journey how I ended up with meditation, but I thought the scientific reason for it and to try to weave together meditation, stress reduction, and ultimately happiness, because we all want to be happy. We all want to live a life that's fulfilling and a happy one. And how can science and in a religious setting be put together? I'm not sure, but I will try. Now, the way I usually do this is I will drag us through the mud, drag us through the problems, the difficulties, and then go over solutions. As Plato said, no one is more hated than the one who speaks the truth. So hopefully at the end of this talk, you will just hate me because some of the truths that I will say will resonate with you. Now, in the Baha'i tradition, science is thought very high. And here, this quote says, if religious beliefs and opinions are found contrary to the standards of science, then they are mere superstitions and imaginations. For the antithesis of knowledge is ignorance, and the child of ignorance is superstition. So therefore, it's acknowledged up front that science is going to discover things, and if religion is against those things or comes up with a different opinion, then you should abandon the religion. So, as you know, I'm a real lover of ancient archaeology and philosophy. So Philo of Larissa, he was the head of the Academy of Athens that was founded by Plato, and he was a friend of Marcus Cicero. Is a theory of skepticism, and I want you to be skeptic. I want you to have a Stoic philosophy. He said the knowledge of nature of things is in the nature of things unknowable and unattainable. And the Baha'i tradition, it's again realized up front that the great divine mystery is going to be unknown. It's not going to be able to be comprehended. And the irony is, as science goes forward, the more we look into atoms and forces, the more it almost becomes voodoo. And that's what is stated in a lot of the philosophical states. So before we go on, I just want to go over some of the names that I'll be using in case people are not as familiar with the Baha'i faith. You know, all religions are founded by somebody. Somebody says, you know, this is what I think we should be doing. And does anybody know in the modern tradition who is a female founder of one of the modern religions? It's not always just males. It has to do with the Seventh-day Adventist, and that is Ellen White. She's really the one that spearheaded that tradition. But in the Baha'i tradition, it's Abrahamic. It's from Moses and Jesus and Muhammad. It's heralded by a Bab. Bab just means in Arabic, the gate. And he said, you know, the person that's going to start the new cycle is coming. And then about 20 years later, this person named Baha'u'llah declared that, yes, here I am. And his son Abdul Baha continued the tradition, and it was internationalized by the grandson of Abdul Baha. It stresses new comprehensive concepts in human behavior, similar to science, that science and religion can actually coexist, and they should be able to not contradict each other. It stresses meditation along with prayer. But as Rainn Wilson had said in the Fireside a few weeks ago, you know, in California, everybody meditates, but nobody prays. And in the East Coast, everybody prays, but nobody meditates. And the reality is that in this tradition, they stress both. And I'm going to try to ask you to be reflective of your own behaviors and your own prejudices, because that's how you're able to shed not accepting and being able to go on. So any form of meditation, as Shoghi Effendi had said, really stresses the reduction of woes and makes our spiritual fulfillment better. If you look at this picture of Abdul Baha, are you intimidated by the turban? Are you intimidated by the beard? So he stated, while you meditate, you are speaking with your own spirit, in that state of mind to put certain questions to your spirit. And then the spirit answers you, more so that you see the light that breaks forth. And the reason that's the case is, the reason you can't answer those things is that you have too much chatter in your brain. Carl Jung said, first we have to look inside as it awakens us. And those who look outside are just dreamers. I thought that was an interesting pun. But it also was stated by Baha'u'llah that the only way to discover the divine is to know yourself, to look deep into yourself, to be critical of yourself and of your behaviors, to realize your shortcomings and be able to come forth with a different path. Life has material purposes, of course, but there's a spiritual one that just makes it a better life to be able to live. To get in touch with our own spiritual selves, we have to decrease the noise in our heads and the noise from the outside world. And essentially, that's what meditation does. It tries to quiet the thoughts that you're constantly bombarding yourself with and get to essentially what you want. And you may not like what you want. You may not like what you want now, but at least it's an honest idea. We are in a consumer society, and that changes our perception of ourselves and what defines we should be happy. It distorts the way we view people. You have to be careful that we do adopt the culture that we live in, whether it's capitalism, tribalism, and we're constantly comparing ourselves to others to decide whether we should be happy or not. How do you stop yourself from comparing? Well, the way to do that is to be able to understand your thoughts and watch them disappear. In this society, we really are never happy with what we have long term. We learn not to be good enough. We don't have enough. Our house is too small. Our car is too old. We don't fix things anymore. I had a flat tire in my car. There was a nail that had gone in, and I could hear it. And then I thought, you just pull it out and you could plug it. So when I took it to the dealer, he said, no, it's under insurance. We'll just get you a new tire. I thought that was a waste. But essentially, that's the way our society is. It also allows us to fail to understand the complex nature of not only everything around us, but what true reality is. It's rather elusive. I still cannot understand how light can be a particle and a wave at the same time. But be it so, that is reality, as much as difficulty as it is. And the only way to begin to understand it is to quiet our mind from the prejudices that we bombard ourselves. The complex nature of things is usually duality. Carl Jung called them the negative and the positives that are inside of us, animi and animum, essentially realizing that there are two forces inside of us. And if we judge them, then we will have problems. But the key is to integrate them into one. The Baha'i perspective talks about the two wolves, and they're both howling, and which one is going to grow in you is the one you're going to feed the most, the one you're going to think about the most. There's a voluminous amount of writing in the Baha'i faith written by Baha'u'llah, who happened to be in prison for a long time, as authorities were worried about what he's going to do. But it gave him a wonderful chance to be able to write, to be able to explain human behavior. And that's why there's a lot of writings to guide people as to what to do. The veils of our consumer society essentially can block our ability to stay permanently, or I should say for a long time, happy. And the way to become happy, if you're not now, is to change your perspective, to be able to let go and change your perspective, of which we'll discuss more how to do that later. But right now, as you realize, I'm just dragging us through the mud to be able to define the problems. We need constant social validation. If you live for others' acceptance, you will surely die from their rejection. Taking advantage of others is sometimes the norm. We focus on material values and ignore genuine ones. And I'm going to define to you what I believe is a genuine value. We always want the latest iPhone. I have to tell you a story. When I met my wife, I didn't have an iPhone, and she thought it was kind of crazy. You know, here I am with a flip phone. Well, you know, I like my flip phone. It was easy. And as a joke, actually, the first time we went out on a date, I said, look, if we get married, I'll buy an iPhone, okay? And, you know, now I have an iPhone. So the goals of consumer society is what? Is high-paying position with a salary, a bank account, a house and a car, and we act successful. And only a person who achieves this receives praise and respect from others. I mean, have you ever praised a homeless person? I'm just trying to show you that we all have prejudices. Is it really all about wealth, looking good to others, beliefs in the lies that we are fed, in jobs we hate, living a life that feels monotonous and meaningless? Well, of course, this is going to lead to depression, and depression is going to rise. The consumer society distracts us from the real value of life, instead towards the ephemeral things, things that disappear, things that are not long lasting, things that only make us happy temporarily with a slight dopamine surge that doesn't last very long. We don't even know that we're doing it, but it is doing it. Now, some of the bright side of the consumer society is there are countless opportunities it offers. It can truly make our dreams come true if we're able to calm our mind and decide what is the thing we want. Everyone can find something in this life, as long as you don't let yourself be fooled by society dictating to you what you should be doing. Some of the things that can be done is you can forget what's popular or prestigious. Look for what matters to you, and that is going to be different for every one of us. But to be able to calm your mind, you'll be able to find what matters. Don't try to do something to gain others' approval. And the way to follow your soul's calling is to decrease your chattering of your mind to reach success. So how are we going to do this? Okay. How are we going to essentially know what we want? Well, we can start by letting go of our prejudices, or letting go of what we think we want. And then what we really want can bubble up as soon as we start to tune down our voices in our heads. We have to realize that we'll make mistakes, and there's nothing wrong with making a mistake. That just, you learn it and you go on. There are several books on that the mistakes we make or the obstacles we have are the way of finding it. There's also by accepting. Recently, we had a turmoil in our division about a month ago. And ultimately, the way you go on is by accepting the situation and bonding with other people that are going through this. And through compassion with everyone there, you overcome it, contemplating the principles of which we will go. So right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to just shut your eyes. I can't see you, so I assume you're going to shut your eyes. So please shut your eyes. And we're going to have a prayer for acceptance, because A for acceptance is the beginning of any kind of journey that you're going to have. So shut your eyes and focus it on your heart. You can almost feel your pulse. You can't, some people can hear their pulse when they shut their mind. So I will say this prayer. Today, I will accept myself just as I am. I will reaffirm I am a beautiful person just as I am. Today, I will accept myself just as I am. I will reaffirm that I am a wonderful person just as I am. I will love myself just as I am. Today, I will say to the infinite divine being, the mystery that we call God, thank you, God, for making me just as I am. Knowing this, I will see the world just as it is. I will accept the world just as it is. And in the clarity of that awareness, I will feel peace, harmony, laughter, and love. Take a deep breath. Open your eyes and accept the world. So I told you I will try to weave stress reduction, happiness, and meditation. So around 400 BC, Solon, the philosopher in Greece, was invited to Croesus, the king of Lydia. Now, some of you, if you know your history, Croesus was conquered by Cyrus. And Cyrus was a Persian king who was the first one to, at least that we have documentation, to write the Bill of Rights of what people had. So Croesus was the king and he wanted to boast, and Solon was a visiting, essentially, philosopher. So they showed him around the kingdom, and Croesus said, "So, who's the happiest man in the world? What do you think, huh? And Solon said, "Oh, tell us from Athena. Oh, he was great. He had a family. He was not too rich, not too poor, lived a long life, got to see his grandchildren, and died." So Croesus was very disappointed. He said, okay, what's the second most happiest man in the world? He said, Agulus on the farm. He was born on a farm, farmed, never left the farm, enjoyed himself on the farm, and died on the farm. He said, okay, come on. Give me the third most happiest man in the world. He's obviously trying to get on the list. He said, Cleobus and Biton, they're brothers. Their mother, Sidipe, needed to go to the temple of Hera, and they couldn't find the oxen to be able to take the cart because she was paraplegic. She couldn't walk. So they just harnessed themselves and they pulled the cart themselves, and they were walking up the stairwell. And she was so proud of her children, and they were very happy to do this for their mother. They were great people. And she prayed to Hera and said, "Hera, please make my children happy." And then Hera calls them to go down, just to sit down and die. And essentially, Croesus said, "What's that?" They said they were very happy. They died happy. And really, you almost have to die to know whether you're going to be happy at the end, because in the end, you'll never know. Things change. So it's hard to know what to say about happiness. Confucius defines happiness as treat others as you would treat yourself. I think if we all followed that rule with sincerity, morality, and compassion towards others, there would just be a much better world. He also said, to be happy, you cannot be angry at anyone because you cannot control anyone. And if you are angry, then you're losing to them. And you have to train your mind to take their feelings into account. So keep it simple and stop spinning stories in your mind. Because ultimately, meditation is trying to get you to realize that the stories you spin in your mind are causing you to not be happy. And the constant thinking that you do in a negative way only goes to make you, and actually act, your whole body will make you feel worse. Go slow. Success is a work in progress. Don't give up, okay? Because you can always find another way of thinking to get around it. But the hurdles are going to help you find the path. Wisdom is gained by reflection, imitation, and experience. And I can tell you, the only reason I can do some surgery is because I have a lot of experience in knowing how not to do that surgery and learning and developing ourselves. And he also felt that meditation cultivates your thoughts. So what are the principles that I'm talking about? Well, prayer, contemplation, and meditation. And these are Baha'i principles. They're simple principles. And each of these serves its purpose. Today, we're talking mostly about meditation. But you can put a show of hand, even though I can't see them, but you can show how many of you are stressed today? How about for the last week? How about for the last month? I know I was stressed for the last month. Some people are stressed for years, and there's clearly people that I've met that are lifers. That's all they are, is just stressed their whole lives. And this is a commercial for Rhode Island. You know, take 2 weeks instead of take 2 pills and call us in the morning. They realize that there's stress, and the belief that you can take pills and it'll relieve your stress, at least for 2 weeks. But anything you do with pills to relieve stress, whether it's Valium or anything like that, you have to remember that there are some side effects, as this cartoon lets us know. And there are things, though, that you can do that have very little side effects. Happiness is an inside job. It's clearly inside you. Some people are just genuinely happy. And that can be a lifelong habit that's important. But how do you get inside yourself? How do you make yourself be happy? Well, I will shift and talk about stress. How do you get stress? What does it look like? Anxiety, irritability, tension. We can always look at someone and say, gosh, they look stressed because their speech is pressured. What causes it? I know it kind of sounds simple, but it's just ideas. That's all it is. And if it is just an idea, then there should be a way to get it better. So the origin of stress is your thoughts. It's pretty simple. In this cartoon here, it says, we had to remove your brain for a couple of days, so just try to relax. Now, the reason it's funny is that you can see the gentleman's face is completely happy, smiling. And we know that if we get rid of our head, we will be very happy if we could just get rid of our thoughts. And that's the funny thing about it. It's true. So negative thoughts lead to negative outcomes. We wake up in the morning, it's raining. Why are you upset it's raining? I mean, the weather changes all the time. It's snowing, it rains, who cares? Oh my God, there's traffic, I'm going to be late at work. Before you even get out of bed, you're already making things negative. News, it's always 75% of the news is always negative. And the reason is that you do get your attention. It gets your attention. I had to talk to Dr. Nasser, who's a sponsor for this, so many times to stop listening to public radio. Public radio is good, you know, it's a good sort of democratic way, and people, you know, tell the news. But the reality is it's still just news, and the news is just negative. So when I trained, we had long hours on call. And I remember one of the residents' mothers had passed away, and he had to go to Texas for her funeral. So therefore, we had to even work longer hours. And one thing that I remember that we didn't say we were tired, because if you keep saying, oh my God, I am so tired, it just makes you more tired. So we just didn't say anything. It was just sort of unspoken. And most of our conversations every day are doom and gloom. We catastrophize. That's all we do. We just whine, whine, whine. It's just so bad. So I started several years ago, actually, to do the opposite. In essence, when someone said, the whining is the headaches, the backaches, the stomach aches. When someone said, how are you doing? I said, gosh, I had a great bowel movement yesterday. It was so good. I feel so light today. I know it sounds kind of silly, but the reality is we should be whining about good habits. It was wonderful to go to the bathroom today, or whatever you want to say. But realize that your words are your thoughts, and that can hurt you. This gentleman clearly looks like he's anally retentive, no doubt. That you are what you think. And if you are calm and if you think calmly, you will look calmly. Children laugh 400 times a day, and adults laugh no more than 15. At this point, and though it's very difficult to do it with the Zoom, I would ask people to just sit there and start laughing. They have actually laughing meditation in the Philippines. They have clubs, laughing clubs. They get together and they just laugh. They don't even say anything. They don't say a joke. They don't say anything. They just sit there and laugh. And the more they laugh, the more they laugh. And it goes on. And studies have shown that your endorphins and how you feel better is just so much better when you do that. But we live like martyrs. My mom passed away several months ago, and she had a china cabinet that those plates were never used. They were beautiful plates, stunningly beautiful, but nope, they were just there just for this. And actually, they were used once when my mother was out of the house. My father opened the cabinet and got a cup of tea, and he called her and she said, "Guess what I'm doing?" And she actually guessed exactly what he was doing. She said, "You're not in that cabinet, using the china." She said, "Yeah, I am." Oh my gosh, she was very upset. But we rationalize. We have anxiety, and that causes depression, and that just doesn't make us laugh, and that makes sense. So realize when you're becoming a martyr. And then why do kids like to be tickled? They just want to laugh for no good reason. Road rage is obviously a big deal. I have not experienced that until one time about 3 years ago, when someone was honking the horn, wanted me to get out of the way, and I couldn't get out of the way. There was too many other cars, and they were just really angry. And I thought, wow, that's really scary, because you always hear about that. So why do we have so much stress? Well, we're clearly overplugged. I have not worn a watch since I was 21 years old. Well, of course, I have a lot of people around me, and I would just ask my secretaries. And of course, now that I carry an iPhone, I can tell what the time it is. But before that, I didn't, and I went out of my way not to. I used to change the clock in my car, and I realized that heart disease is a big deal in my family, and actually with what I do. And I don't want to go tick, 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 tick. I just want to literally go different than that. I don't want to know what time it is. But we're all essentially overplugged. Everybody, especially those what are those iPhone watches? People get a bing like every time you get a fax, or not a fax. I'm sorry, an email, and that's just constantly dinging you. Do you really want that? Does it make your life easier? Are you really fooling yourself thinking that you're got the hippest watch? Is it just making you unplugged? So here's anger management, a cartoon, and it's hateful thoughts or intense anger proceed to ruin your health. So about 15 years ago, I remember it was August, and I don't know, for some reason, when we were rounding, and of course there's always problems when we're rounding, one thing or another, I started saying the term, "Oh, that's a pain in the ass. Oh, that's a pain in the ass." And about 30 days later, I started having rectal bleeding. I thought, whoa, what is that? That's kind of weird. But I just thought about what was I saying to my body, and that my body essentially responded. I thought the two and the timing was a bit peculiar. So here's the experimental nature, or rather experimental evidence about the thoughts and about stress and happiness. How do thoughts affect our health? So here's these rabbits. It's the rabbit experiment. So AstraZeneca wants to start a new drug that's going to lower cholesterol. But of course, they have to use basic data, which is essentially rat or lab data, to show that this medicine works. So what they do is they give the rabbits a high cholesterol diet and then give them the drug and then demonstrate that their cholesterol goes down when they're eating the high cholesterol diet. The problem was they couldn't get the study started. Lots of money's in this, they couldn't get it started because they couldn't predict which rabbits are getting the elevated cholesterol. When they would draw the blood, none of the cholesterol would be up. And it turned out that there was a factor that protected them of their cage, meaning that the rabbits at the bottom of the cages, they could not get their cholesterol to go up with the high fat diet. And the rabbits at the top of the cages, which are several stacked together, they had their cholesterol go up with the high fat diet. And the question is why? They couldn't figure out, they couldn't even get it started. But it turns out someone identified the reason is that the cage handler was short. And the cage handler would take the rabbits that were in the bottom of the cages and take them out and pet them and then feed them. And the rabbits that were on the top cages, he could not reach well. So he would just throw the food in the cages so that the petting of the rabbit completely negated the high cholesterol diet. So I'm not saying that you should get someone to pet you and then you could eat bacon and eggs in the morning, but it does put together, well, what about humans? Does that make sense for humans? Well, people and patients that have cardiac bypass can decrease their rate of death if their spouses love them. So if you perceive that your spouse loves you, you have a 25% less rate of death by undergoing cardiac bypass than if you did not. So reality is fickle. Reality is what we think. Kittens are born with their eyes shut and then their eyes open and then they adjust. So if you raise a kitten in a totally horizontal environment, they cannot see vertical things. They actually will run into the legs of a chair because they can't see it. They don't have the apparatus to be able to see it. Sir John Eccles, who was a neurologist at the turn of the century, said, there's no such thing as color or sound or patterns or beauty. It's really our participation in it that's important and makes it reality. And if you wonder, and one of my colleagues, Dr. Peter Zucker, and I always argue about this question, and that has to do with if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? I don't think it does, because you need an ear to make a sound. It makes a vibration, no doubt, because really everything vibrates, as we will show later, but it doesn't make a sound. So it's your participation. And physics, as we do more studies, clearly shows that literally observing a study will change its outcome based on your observation, which is the spooky science that Albert Einstein talked about. So maintaining a calm mind causes you to be happy despite poor health, because your compass of being happy, of being calm, is inside you, not on the outside. So how do we achieve that? Okay. How have thoughts affect your mind? Well, more people have a heart attack on Monday than any other day. And what is Monday but a thought, right? It's just a thought. It's an artificial construct. There's really no Monday in the world. It's just that we make it up. So you have to look, are you happy? Do you like your work? So other experiments, there is Timmy, who has multiple personalities. Now, Timmy is someone's got many personalities, and whether you believe in multiple personalities or not, this is what the study had shown. The irony of it is, some of Timmy's personalities have allergies. So if he is, and allergies specifically to orange juice, that's how I remember the study. So if he's drinking orange juice and he happens to change to the personality that is allergic to it, he will get hives and start to have an asthmatic attack. So what does that mean? What is the scientific basis of that? So an allergy is a white blood cell is dumping a bunch of IgE and causing the hives and the wheals. It means that the white blood cell had a choice. Do I dump the IgE or not, based on the personality, based on the mindset? It's interesting. When you count all the stresses in life, there's actually a stress scale by Holmes. If you hit more than 200 per year, you have a 95% correlation of a major illness that you're going to get. Whether you're fired at work, retirement, even vacation, there's a certain score, and death of a spouse seems to be the highest. So medical students and scientific basis is, they're great, because I was a medical student and I would do anything they told me. They said, okay, jump high and don't come down for 10 seconds. I said, okay, fine, we'll do that, not a problem. So they will do whatever you need them to do. And they essentially squirt rhinovirus, viruses that cause colds, in their noses. And they gave them the MMPI, they gave them the a survey to see who's depressed and how their moods are. And only the students that were depressed got colds. The other students did not. There was no colds at all. So it really is important how you feel about whatever you're doing. The perception of emotion, the perception and emotions really are key, because these emotions are temporary. And if you just allow them to go, and if you let them go, you'll be far better off. You can fly in a rage, but you're not actually in a rage if you want to change your perception. Anger is just an emotion that temporarily has settled in you and will leave. And then you realize that you don't have to essentially take a stand. You can just wait and see how things go. Because each emotion has a context, a circumstance. It's temporary, and it's defined by reality just slightly. It's another study, it's an older study by Adder in 1974 with immune conditioning. Anticipated nausea and vomiting, I actually had that last year, is essentially before you get chemotherapy, before you actually have the medications that cause nausea and vomiting, you start having nausea and vomiting. And you say, hey, yeah, that's in your head. I get it. I understand. It's a very real phenomenon. So these rats were given Cytoxan, which is a chemotherapeutic agent. And they were nauseated, they vomit as expected. And then 2 weeks later, their white blood cell counts drop. And that's called a nadir, where you're given a cytotoxic drug and your white blood cells drop 2 weeks later. And then they recover, and then you're given another dose of chemo. And the Cytoxan looks orange. The color of it is orange. So these rats were given that several times. And then they were just given water that just looks like it's orange. That's it. But it was just water. It was just normal saline, rather. And yes, they got nauseated, they got vomiting. But what was unanticipated was 2 weeks later, their white blood cell counts dropped. Their white blood cell counts dropped. So the bone marrow that did not receive the chemotherapy said to itself, oh, we must have gotten chemo. We're going to stop making white blood cells now. So it literally fooled its own self. It perceived something different. Understand the significance of this, that physical structure changes, as does the thought. So the interpretation of reality changes the physical effect. So polygraph test. I don't know if you know exactly how that works. Essentially, you sweat in your skin, and the increasing water of the sweat causes the polygraph to register a higher connectivity. And that happens instantly. It's not as fast as the speed of light, but it is in most people pretty fast, that essentially your nerves change based on your thoughts. And it's important to do that. A little bit of a busy slide, I'm sorry, but you have to realize what's inside will come out if you squeeze it. So if you squeeze an orange, would you ever get lemon? Would you ever get grape? No, you get orange, right? So therefore, when you are squeezed, if you cultivate love, compassion, the only thing that can come out is love and compassion, no matter how hard you are squeezed. It's nothing else can come out. Now, to be realistic, I realized in the book of Ecclesiastes, vanities of vanities, saith the preacher, vanities of vanities. Habil Havalim. I don't speak Hebrew, but that's my understanding is Habil Havalim says vanities of vanities. That really everything we do is vanity, empty, futile, short-lived. It doesn't matter if you're wise or a fool ultimately, because everyone ends up dying. The author, it's a very depressing book, goes on to encourage wisdom as something to strive for in order to ensure a well-lived earthly life. But he is skeptical of whether it carries any long-term benefits beyond this life. Though the book ends that we should be good because it'll ultimately help us. I'm not sure if that was just added onto the book of Ecclesiastes later. Another translation is vapor upon vapor. Life is just vapors. Marcus Aurelius was essentially the Vladimir Putin of his time. He was ultimately, it was an emperor of Rome. And the nice thing is that he was also a philosopher in that we have a lot of his meditations that he wrote. And he would write just about every night a little bit. So he stated, the longest lived and those who will die soonest lose the same thing. They lose the present. The present is all that they can give up, since that is all you have. And what you do not have, you cannot lose. As he tucked his children at night, he would tell himself, don't rush this. Don't rush this. How many times when we put the kids to bed, oh, come on, kids, we're so tired. Hurry up and go to sleep. He realized that those moments and what's important, and that's what the principles. And if you calm your mind, you'll find what is important for yourself. That he would recall that this may be the last time as he would go off to wars. Stoics and Buddhists contemplate on death, that they meditate on their own death to appreciate the impermanence of life. Talking about life, what happens to us? Up here in the right upper quadrant, or left upper quadrant, we're born, we go to the grave, and here's how we're going to die. Okay, here's all the percentages: heart disease, cancers, Alzheimer's. This is a mechanical life. We're on a third rock from the moon. And if you think of what does an apple tree do? Well, it produces apples, okay? And the earth produces peoples. It's a peopling tree, okay? We're falling in high speed with the earth, running around. But there are moments that you have to enjoy, like grabbing the little foot of the baby. One of the most joys that I have is when watching the grandchildren, and they run into each other with the highest speed, and they bump their heads, and they cry just a little bit, and then they get up and they smile and they keep going again. And I wonder, wow, what resilience. They really know how to let go of anything. That hurts a little bit, and here they go. They don't hold on to it as we all do. But so what's the goal of first grade? Well, to get to second grade, and the goal of high school to get to college and grad school. And there you are with a briefcase, ready for the rat race. And what does it mean? At the end, what do you get? Just menopause, hemorrhoids, elderly parents. Where's the prize? Viktor Frankl, who was in Auschwitz, he said the meaning of life is really what we put in it, what we make of it. And if you take that seriously, you realize that you have to make yourself a good person. Now, nature gives us a lot of examples that how we can be essentially not so uptight. What's the goal of music? Is it to end the music? If that was the case, then we would all go to the lyric opera house. We'd sit down and it would be the band conductor, and they would just play boom, one note. And that's it. That's the goal. We finished. Thank you very much. And what about dancing? What's the point of dancing? But there is no goal. There is no hurry. There is no right or wrong. And most things in life are really just that. They're just shades of complex issues. It's only a vibration. And the vibration is a sound alternating with silence, crescent and a wave, dark and light. true human nature, as the previous slides earlier had said, there's a duality. There's good and bad. I am very bad and I am very good. And I try to feed my good side. And understanding that the two are implicably one is a good thing and allows me to keep going. Because when we forget that, we get fear. And what does fear, F-E-A-R, stand for? False evidence appearing real. You don't have a problem. You only think you do. And that was Wayne Dyer's main theme. He says, look, you don't have a problem. You just think you do. And once you realize and let go of that. So when you have the emotions come to you and through you and they're temporary, what are they vibrating anyway? So what is the most part of your body? What do you constitution most? Well, it happens to be water. And water must be vibrating through that. Now, Dr. Emoto, he wrote Messages in Water. The thing that you realize is that there are no two snowflake crystals that are alike, okay? 70% of the water in our bodies is water, 99% when you're a fetus, 90% at birth, and then as you go towards death, you have less water. The connection to water applies to everything. When the water stagnates, if you realize water that is not flowing, it smells bad and it accumulates bacteria. And it's similar to emotions. Another way of thinking how the stress and holding on to something, if I have a glass of water in my hand, that's not a big deal, right? I'm just holding it. But if I hold it for an hour, even a half a glass of water, that's going to hurt. If I hold it for a whole day, that's going to even be much worse for my hand and for me. And the best way to get rid of that is just to put the glass on the table and let it go. And when you do that, you're not stagnating. So he published a series of this where he would essentially write words and put them on a glass, and the next day he would look at the crystals. And this is a crystal here of happiness. Okay, and this one just looks like a little person sitting and meditating. And here's his lab where it has to be done. He's wearing a coat because it has to be done in -5 degrees centigrade. And here he would put the water and what he's written, and music rather. Here's the music and the speakers on the water. And here is this crystal here. You can see it like broken. And this is the water, what it looks like when they played Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel. I thought that was really interesting. It looks like it's slightly broken. And here are these crystals, tap water before and remote prayers, and how the crystals changed. And the one that's really quite dramatic, okay, is the Fujimura Dam. Here is the water before offering a prayer, and here's after a Buddhist monk prays on the water. It really changes. So in Baha'i faith, we have prayers and we have revealed prayers. And essentially, you're changing the water of yourself. And that's important because it's all about you and how you start to react. And here's the same thing with the dam before the prayer and after the prayer. And remember, all the crystals are different. So, life is duality, right? So here's a prayer for the stressed, okay? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I cannot accept, and the wisdom to hide the bodies of those people I had to kill today because they really pissed me off. And also help me to be careful of the toes I step on today, as they may be connected to the ass that I have to kiss tomorrow. And help me, please, to remember when I'm having a really bad day and it seems that people are trying to piss me off, that it takes 42 muscles to frown and only 4 to extend my middle finger and tell them to bite me. Amen. Can I hear an amen?
Amen.
So now that I've dragged us through the mud, okay, let me tell you about how we can relieve this. I have to simplify a lot of things, more so your life. Acknowledge that, hey, this is difficult. Be honest with yourself, which is, again, difficult. and realize that getting the thoughts out of your head are the best way to get there. Herbert Benson had research in the 70s. He was a Harvard professor that defined the relaxation response. Okay, he would just say, all you have to do is just sit in a corner and just repeat the number 1. That's it. That's all he did. He demonstrated elegantly that by doing so, you're able to decrease your blood pressure, even improve your diabetes. And he also was open that once he was changing a light bulb in his kitchen and he fell and he cracked his rib. And he says, look, when you do that, you can't start to meditate because you need someone to fix your rib. You need interventional medicine. So you need to decrease the flight or fight response, and it improves the epinephrine in your system. So the meditator's benefits, it brings present moment awareness. The technique is very simple, and there's a lot of ways to meditate. In the Baha'i faith, really any way to meditate is fine. There's no one way sanctioned. The simplest one that I would want you to think about is really breathing meditation. And the breathing meditation is you put your timer on your phone and just start with just 30 seconds. 30 seconds, and therefore just concentrate on your breath and and when you think of something, okay, just let it go, okay? Just when you think of something, it's going to come to you, just let it go, say, and don't judge the thought, go back to your breath. Now, the reason this is something called the taxi experiment. So if I tell you, don't think of a polar bear, and for about 30 minutes. And, it can be done. You can not think about a polar bear. But then right after the 30 minutes is over, I said, okay, time's up. You're fine. Okay. Is that the polar bear starts dancing in your head and going crazy for the next 30 minutes to 1 hour. However, if I tell you every time you think of the polar bear, think of a taxi cab, then lo and behold, you can still do it for the 30 minutes. But then the following 30 minutes, you are not going to have the polar bear plague you like you would had you not used the taxi thought to block the polar bear. And essentially, what you're doing with regular meditation is you're just using your breath, which most people breathe all the time. You're using your breath to be the taxi, to block the thoughts. It's very difficult in the beginning. 1 minute can be just a very long time. But eventually, with practice and discipline, you'll be able to give yourself more time. And it's felt that if you just do 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon or in the evening, that's more than enough to calm your mind and to decrease your stress because you'll be doing it from the inside job. There are 3 things that can essentially happen if you're meditating. You could fall asleep, and that's okay because you're tired. You could be bored. And then you have to ask yourself, is your life boring? What else is going on? And the third thing, if you keep it up, is you go somewhere, I have no idea where you go, but you can tell you're there when you come out of it. When you say, oh my God, what happened? What was that? Was I asleep? Not really, not sure. And the more you go to that place, the more you're able to make decisions better for yourself and have a better life. The Baha'is gift of detachment, forgiveness, present moment awareness, and the guidance that is given by the teachings and realistic expectations. The Baha'is are, in some ways, what I've noticed is that they're very pessimistic. Yeah, life's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. And the other thing, as much as the meditation is promoted, most Baha'is that I know really don't practice the meditation so much, even though it's supposed to be as important as the prayer. And I think that's just tradition. In some ways, I would like to see Baha'i meetings start with a prayer as well as a 1 minute of silence, because then it would essentially start to think about the silence and how important that may be. So in conclusion, yesterday is gone, tomorrow is unknown, and today is a gift. That is why it is called the present. I thank you for your attention.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Abbas. I have to share this with our friends. there are people that you meet them and you love them, and you have to really think about, why do I love this person? You know, tonight was a very revealing night for me. First of all, I'm getting to know more Dr. Abbas. I'll share with you that this is really wonderful, really. He's the man, really, he has accepted himself. You know, it is not just the thought that he shared with us. He really has accepted. And his deed is really lots of good actions, lots of good deeds. And that is so wonderful. Now, that's why I love him so much. You know, I found some of the things why I love him. Thank you so much, Dr. Fouad. Alex.
Hey, Dr. Abbas, thank you for your presentation this evening. I wanted to pick up on just that last suggestion that that the Baha'is start their gatherings with a meditation. And I know for those folks that haven't been to a Baha'i gathering, there's many ways, you know, especially if you're, depending on what part of the country in the United States you're coming from, if not part of the world you're coming from, a Baha'i gathering looks very different. From a very high level, is there any limitation on Baha'is starting with a meditation? Could that be something that is totally acceptable within the Baha'i faith, and you know, we could implement today for those communities that want to do that?
I think that would be a good thing, only because then people will be reminded that quietness, self-reflection, trying to get rid of the thoughts is going to be helpful, and it is promoted in the religion. It's highly promoted. Now, you know, you can go like two extremes. The Buddhists are only about meditation, and the Buddhists are so much into meditation is that it's promoted to be a monk and to be by yourself. And in the Baha'i religion, again, it's not easy. They say, no, you can't meditate. You can't be rather a monk, or rather you shouldn't be a monk. You should engage in life. You should take on the difficulties that are daily with marriage and children and the whole catastrophe. There's actually a book written by John Kabat-Zinn called The Full Catastrophe. It harkens back on the movie Zorba the Greek. And Zorba the Greek is sitting there, and some of you might remember that in the 60s. And Anthony Quinn is saying, you know, the American that's there, he says, so did you ever be married and have children? He says, oh yeah, I was married, I had children, I had a job. I had the full catastrophe. So the book was called Full Catastrophe Living. And you know, some of us who have been through that realize that it is a catastrophe. And but in it gives us virtues to be able to find the people that irritate us so much that we can then pray for them. Again, to pray for your enemies is really an ultimate goal of letting go of your own ego and realizing that that other person has a mother, has a father, has a hard life. They will grow old and tired, and they will die. And that makes us better individuals.
Thank you. And then earlier in your presentation, you touched on the figure of Abdu'l-Baha, and I wanted to read a single sentence from a book in which he's recorded about a series of talks called Paris Talks, aptly named for its location. And I wanted to read this sentence and then get your feedback based on his comments here in regards to meditation. He says, through the faculty of meditation, man attains to eternal life, and through it, he receives the breath of the Holy Spirit. The bestowal of the Spirit is given in reflection and meditation. Now, you mentioned that sometimes we fall asleep. So is that when the Holy Spirit comes, or does he come later?
That's a good question. I think we fall asleep because we're tired. And that's a great question. And I don't think the answer comes as you're meditating. I think that's I remember one of people in Greece that I knew. Her meditation was such that she wanted to see colors and fantasies, and those are guided meditations that are done. This isn't really what I'm talking about. Guided meditations are nice, but the reality is that later you start to be able to be more calm so that you can make decisions appropriate for you. You know, life is difficult. It's not easy, and you have to be prepared to try to take on the tough things. But if you fall asleep, that's good. That's a good thing. You know, you need sleep. It's okay. That's why I don't like to wouldn't like to meditate close to sleep, because that's just too tired. It's better to do it either in the morning or in the early evening or late afternoon.
Thank you. And then we had a couple folks join us a little bit later in your presentation, just to put a fine point on it for them. Is there a specific method that Baha'is are told, hey, this is how you guys are supposed to meditate? As you know, and you spoke on many different religions, you covered a lot of ground, both from a philosophical standpoint as well as a religious standpoint. In regards to meditation, do the Baha'is have any guidance on what they're supposed to think about, what they're supposed to meditate upon? Are they supposed to do it out loud in their chambers, or the different nuances there?
As far as I remember, between prayer, contemplation, and meditation, really any form of meditation. I think Shoghi Effendi wrote about that. He said really any form of meditation. Because he made a distinction between that contemplation and prayer. I don't think there's one that says you should. I like the breath meditation because it's simple, cheap, and easy, and it sort of quiets the mind enough. But there's other meditations like walking meditations. And what walking meditation is you walk on grass, because it's felt that would be you're more connected to the earth, and you just concentrate on your walking. And as soon as you stop thinking about the walking and think about something else, you stop your walk. And then once you just think about walking, I didn't have a chance. I started writing a little short story about driving meditation. So how in the world do you have driving meditation? That's kind of crazy, isn't it? No, it's actually you drive and you're just concentrating on your drive. You'd be surprised that you actually are going back and forth so much when you're driving from your seat that you have no idea. And the sounds, the little squeaks, and of course I had an older car and there was a lot of squeaks that occur. And that's it. I mean, meditation is just concentration on this. And when our mind is too busy, we're unable to recognize that we're hurting someone, that we're saying something to hurt someone. But when we have a calm mind and we're present, then we know we're not going to say something to hurt that person. Or if we do, we recognize it and we apologize. We back off rather than let our emotions come in and our rage take over, to be able to just make it a tough life.
I wanted to actually speak upon or ask you about a personal question in your unique scenario as somebody that does operate in a hospital environment daily, if not every other day. Certainly when you're at a peak performance, there's a feeling that you get. There's a flow that individuals enter into when they're feeling calm and excited. Al Bors and his friend spoke about this last week, that there's this feeling that you enter. Do you find yourself during points of intense surgery or even common surgery, do you find yourself entering this same feeling of being in a flow that one would get when being in a meditation, where there's a sense of calm and peacefulness, even with the hectic environment that you're operating in?
I think that's key. In surgery itself, when the nurse is screaming, when the blood is flowing, she can't find the clamp that I'm asking for, anesthesia says blood pressure is dropping, the resident is answering the page on their Vocera, and there's just a host of things. But you have to be able to pick what's important, what's not important, and that's where the flow comes in. I mean, to me, surgery is a ballet, and when it's done well and you have this, it just perfectly smoothly flows, even if it's a disaster, even if something is going, it's still a beautiful flow. In meditation, the flow in meditation, let's just breathing meditation, is really attained after a long period of time when you're able to really quiet your mind. And, first there's going to be thoughts, And there's other ways of meditating with something called a mantra, which is a nonsensical word. But then that disappears, and then you're somewhere else. And if you look at the brainwave pattern, they're different. So it literally is a different state of consciousness. And the longer you can stay in that consciousness, the more you're able to change your perspective and be a better person. That's I think the key. The key is not so much to then go into a corner and just stay quiet for a long time. No, the key is to come out of that corner and be able to engage with others and be a better person. Be a better person for your family, for everybody around you.
Thank you. And in our final question, which will be a two-part for you. The first is, there's a proportion of our audience tonight and those that will listen in the future that don't meditate. And what you're describing here is almost as if, you've got the basketball player that can make a 3-point shot every single time. It's natural, it's easy, it feels comfortable. And there's a proportion of our audience that isn't necessarily at that level or at the current moment. What can you advise them in terms of, what you'll feel at the beginning of your journey when it comes to meditation, as compared to what you might expect when you're at your peak performance, when things are going well for you, as well as, when you are starting that journey, how can you narrow in your thoughts and make sure those intrusive thoughts are, entering and then quickly leaving and not interrupting your study?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. The first step of any journey is obviously just the first step. So you have to come up with a method. And honestly, the way I was trained, we're disciplined. I'm disciplined. If whatever I have to do, I will get it done. That's why Dr. Nasser always gives me something when I'm really busy. He says, "Oh, by the way, can you do a fireside next week or 2 weeks from now?" I thought, geez, you give whatever you want done, you give it to the most busiest person because they'll come up with a way to do it. And you have to come up with your own way. The simple breathing is just put 30 seconds on your clock, on your iPhone, and then 30 seconds for 1 week, and then do it 1 minute for 1 week. And understand those intrusive thoughts. Oh my God, I hated that thing that just happened. It's okay. It's just that the thought will come, don't judge it, and just escort it out. And if you want to stay with your thought for a while, that's fine. There's no right or wrong. Just recognize it's the letting go of whatever those thoughts are that are going to prepare you for all the people that are going to absolutely anger you in the future. And then you start to recognize patterns that you really never recognized before. It's a beautiful thing when it happens, but you have to start.
So basically, your message is start today, and eventually you will get there. But just because
start, and don't worry about the goal. Just start. And really make it easy for yourself. 30 seconds. That's it. 30 seconds. We actually we had with I don't know if Rebecca is here or not. We had like a little meditation circle. That's what I called it. And what we would do is we would meditate for like a minute, and then we would text each other in a thing. Done. So therefore you have motivation. You have to come up with motivations to be able to do that. And in the past it was easier, but life gets busier and so on. So come up with whatever you want, like a meditation circle. That I think I did it with Ziba for a while as well, if I remember correctly. And
yes, you did. And Rebecca is here too.
Right, and those are very nice. Those can motivate you, and you have to just with anything like exercise or anything like that. As humans, we need motivation. And other people can motivate us. Other people can, tell us to keep going.
Thank you very much. And so we'll conclude by just putting Dr. Bashir Lahi's and Ziba's phone number in the chat so everybody can text them all the time that they're meditating. No, we thank you, Dr. Abbas, for your conversation this evening and presenting, all your insights as it relates to meditation. Thank you very much. And I'm sure you can see from the chat all the thoughts of appreciation coming in from our audience. So, Dr. Bashir Lahi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex and Dr. Abbas, very much. Kendrick, are you ready?
Yes, sir. O my God, my God. These are servants attracted in thy days by the fragrances of thy holiness, kindled with the flame, burning in thy holy tree, responding to thy voice, uttering thy praise, awakened by thy breeze, stirred by thy sweet savors, beholding thy signs, understanding thy verses, hearkening to thy words, believing thy revelation, and assured of thy loving kindness. Their eyes, O Lord, are fixed upon thy kingdom of effulgent glory, and their faces turned toward thy dominion on high, their hearts beating with the love of thy radiant and glorious beauty, their souls consumed with the flame of thy love. O Lord of this world and the world hereafter, their lives seething with the ardor of their longing for thee, and their tears poured forth for thy sake. Shield them within the stronghold of thy protection and safety. Preserve them in thy watchful care. Look upon them with the eyes of thy providence and mercy. Make them the signs of thy divine unity that are manifest throughout all regions, the standards of thy might that wave above thy mansions of grandeur, the shining lamps that burn with the oil of thy wisdom in the globes of thy guidance, the birds of the garden of thy knowledge that warble upon the topmost boughs in thy sheltering paradise, and the leviathans of the ocean of the bounty that played by the supreme mercy in the fathomless deeps. O Lord my God, lowly are these servants of thine, exalt them in thy kingdom on high. Feeble, strengthen them by the supreme power. Abased, bestow upon them the glory in thine all highest realm. Poor, enrich them in thy great dominion. Do thou then ordain for them all the good thou hast destined in thy words, visible and invisible. Prosper them in this world below. Gladden their hearts with thine inspiration. O Lord of all beings, illumine their hearts with thy joyful tidings, diffused from thine all glorious station. Make firm thy steps in thy most great covenant, and strengthen their loins in thy firm testament. By thy bounty and promised grace, O gracious and merciful one, thou art verily the gracious, the all bountiful.